So we are going to start our PowerPoints with chapter 1. I will do my best to make videos of each PowerPoint that kind of helps. And I'm opening it through Canvas, so you don't even have to have PowerPoint to watch these. So we start by asking the question, what is law? And law consists of rules that regulate conduct for individuals, businesses, and organizations. In this particular class, we're going to talk about laws that regulate society, criminal law, tort law. We're going to look at individuals, as well as jumping into contract law, corporation law, and business law in general for those of you, most of you that are business majors. It is intended to protect people and their property from unwanted interference of others. And I'm sure many of you have examples of that. And then the law forbids persons from engaging in certain undesirable activities. So public intoxication, murder, obviously we have a sliding scale, but there's lots of laws that contribute to disallowing people to do undesirable behavior. The definition of law in your book is that which must be obeyed and followed by citizens, subject to sanctions or legal consequences. If you break a law, you're going to owe a fine or you're going to be incarcerated. You potentially could owe money to another party. It just depends on what type of law you break. A body of rules of action or conduct prescribed by controlling authority that have binding legal effect. So we want to make sure that we understand that there has to be a law that's broken to have some sort of consequence. Just because you don't like the reaction or the outcome doesn't necessarily mean an individual broke the law. There's many functions of law. We'll look at keeping the peace, moral standards, promoting social justice, maintaining status quo, facilitating orderly change, facilitating planning, providing a basis for compromise. That's a big one for you business majors. And then maximizing individual freedom. And we'll look at the Constitution. We'll look at individual freedoms given to us within our country. So I often find this topic fairly humorous for the fact that you always hear children saying that's not fair. Well, what is fair? The U.S. legal system, as we know it, is a comprehensive, fair, and democratic society. We try to treat everyone equally, though I know there's some arguments that we're far from that at this point, but we're doing the best that we can. And flexibility. So it evolves with time. We used to have laws that you could not park your horse and buggy on a certain street after 4 o'clock. Well, we no longer have those laws for the sheer fact that we don't have a horse and buggy anymore, so it wouldn't really be helpful for us. Sorry, I'm drinking coffee as I'm doing this. So if you hear me slurp, I apologize. Now, your book identifies several different schools of thought, and we looked at natural school of thought, historical school of thought. These are two different theories. So natural law school is based on what is quote unquote correct, what we feel that society should be. It's based on ethics and morality. Obviously, it can change from time to time. Women weren't allowed to wear sleeveless shirts at one point. That was unethical or immoral. That's no longer the case. Then we're looking at historical school. So this is where we look at social traditions and customs, and they change with the norms of society. So they're going to slowly transition into law. Analytical school is shaped by logic. It's the emphasis that logic is a result rather than on how the result is reached. So we're looking at what is the logical sense? Is that law logical in the context of where we're providing it in society? Sociological, obviously, the study of behavior, human interactions, means achieving and advancing certain sociological goals. The purpose of law is to shape social behavior. We want to make things legal or illegal to make sure people's behavior follows that. So drinking and driving would be a good example. We want to discourage that social behavior. And then command school. So this is a law in which a set of rules developed, communicated, and is enforced by ruling parties. It's more of the authoritarian type behavior. Critical legal studies believes that legal rules are unnecessary. Legal disputes should be circumstantially solved by applying arbitrary rules by what is deemed fair. So that would mean everything is done on a case-by-case basis. There's no governing party. And then economic school. So promoting market efficiency should be central to making a legal decision. So is that good for our economical society? And you could argue that our society now is very similar to that, or where we get a little bit away from morality and more about the economic side of it. And the English system of law was adopted, obviously, from early American colonies, and we are based on the English system. So coming from England, that's kind of the basis of our judicial society. And it was acted as a foundation for American judges to develop a common law in America. And we still use that common law today. English common law was a little bit different. It was judges issue their opinions in deciding cases, and then they announce those cases and use them as what we call precedent for later judges deciding similar cases. So our judges today are actually bound by the laws that were created by judges on those same topics in the same judicial area. So if you're in the Ninth Circuit and there's a ruling within that Ninth Circuit on a case that you have, that would be precedent and used to make that decision. Uniform systems, of course, emphasize form over substance. They grant monetary damages or money. And then there's equity courts. So they're looking to redeem a certain situation, maybe stop an action. And then there's merchant courts, which are more like small claims courts. The Constitution. So this is what we call the supreme law of the land. It establishes structure for our federal government. So we have 3 branches of our federal government. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that: legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Each one of these have enumerated federal powers. Any powers that are not delegated to those 3 branches are given to the states to rule over their power. Treaties are another type of law. This is used by the president, and they can set into foreign powers, dealing with trade agreements, things like that. Federal statutes. Now, these come after the Constitution. They are written laws that establish certain courses of conduct. So the U.S. government can enact federal statutes, they're put into a code, and then they're codified into law by our Congress. State statutes are the same, but they're done through state legislature. And then ordinances are done at the local level. Executive orders are issued by the president, and this is delegated specifically to him within the Constitution. Then we go through regulatory powers. There's different SEC or FTC companies that create regulations that may be environmental codes, things like that. And lastly, we have judicial decisions. These are our court rulings, and they're put into law by precedent. We have to follow those. The rationale for these sources have to do with interpretations, administrations, and ordinances. And then this is a big, and hopefully you all listen to the very end of this, stare decisis, has to do with the idea of precedent. So this just means federal and state courts must follow decisions that were already put into law, starting with the U.S. Supreme Court, which is the highest law of the land, and then filtering down from our federal courts into our state courts and our local district courts. The U.S. Constitution obviously takes precedence over everything. So if the U.S. Constitution has ruled on a matter, it's going to be the supreme law of the land, and then we drop down through that delineation. State constitutions rank the highest in the state. We must follow the state constitution, and then we can make determinations after that. And digital law is very similar, but it's just a new innovative way. We're looking at regulations on the internet, regulations on digital forms instead of our paper forms. Hopefully you don't have any questions, but feel free to email me through Canvas and let me know if you have any questions on Chapter 1.